once led by confidence, now trembles with questions. In the halls of power, where words weigh more than armies, something unexpected just echoed. A diplomat from India, Dr. S. Jaishankar, stands before the microphones, unshaken. His words don't shout, they cut. He speaks of fairness, hypocrisy, and forgotten respect. Across oceans, his sentences ripple through Washington, London, and beyond. What he said wasn't loud, but the silence that followed was deafening. All limits may have just been crossed. To understand the moment, we must return to the beginning. For decades, India was spoken about, not with. A nation of billions, yet treated as an afterthought in rooms where the world was divided. During the Cold War, India stood between the two giants, neither West nor East, both skeptical and self-reliant. It built alliances not on fear, but on principle. And it learned something the powerful often forget. Silence can be a weapon too. As the century turned, the world began to shift. India's economy grew, its voice strengthened, but respect did not come easily. It was demanded, often with quiet defiance. When Dr. S. Jaishankar became foreign minister, he carried that defiance with discipline. An ex-diplomat turned strategist, he understood one truth. Diplomacy is not about pleasing, it's about positioning. The world before him saw India as a participant. He would make it a pole. The transformation didn't happen overnight. It was years of careful strategy, calculated responses, and unwavering conviction. Jaishankar brought something rare to international diplomacy: clarity without aggression, firmness without hostility, truth without apology. His background shaped this approach. Decades in diplomatic service, postings in Prague, Budapest, Tokyo, Washington. He saw how power operated from the inside. He learned its language, its rhythms, its unspoken rules. But he also saw its contradictions. The gap between proclaimed values and actual policies. The selective application of international law. The convenient forgetting of historical wrongs when they became inconvenient to present narratives. When he took office as External Affairs Minister in 2019, he brought this experience with him. Not as bitterness, but as clarity. He knew the game. He simply refused to play by rules written by others. And slowly, speech by speech, interview by interview, he began to reshape how India spoke to the world. It began subtly. A tone, a phrasing, a refusal to bow. In global meetings, Jaishankar's voice began to challenge the unspoken hierarchies of the West. And one by one, his words became moments, each more defining than the last. When asked about India's relationship with Russia, Jaishankar replied with surgical precision. Europe has to grow out of the mindset that its problems are the world's problems, but the world's problems are not Europe's problems. The statement was calm, measured, but in Western capitals, it hit like thunder. For decades, the Global South had accepted double standards. Lectures on democracy from those who invaded sovereign lands. Lessons on peace from those who sold weapons. Criticism of human rights from nations built on colonialism and slavery. The script had always been written by the powerful. The rest of the world was expected to recite its lines without question. But now the script was being rewritten, not by anger, but by truth. When questioned about India's oil purchases from Russia during the Ukraine conflict, Jaishankar didn't deflect. He stated facts. Europe bought more Russian energy in an afternoon than India bought in a month, yet only India faced scrutiny. Why? The question hung in the air. unanswered by those who asked it. This was the new Indian diplomacy. Not defensive, not apologetic, simply factual, and devastating in its simplicity. From another corner of the world, an unexpected voice amplified this same spirit. Carolina Goswami, a European woman who spoke of India with precision and respect. She wasn't a politician or diplomat. She was an observer, a researcher, someone who looked beyond headlines and examined evidence. And what she found contradicted much of what Western media portrayed about India. She called out the hypocrisy of Western narratives, the biases that clouded perception, the selective outrage that defined coverage of non-Western nations. Her speeches, calm and fact-driven, became viral across continents. She spoke of colonial legacy rarely discussed in European schools, of wealth extraction that funded Western development, of imposed famines and systematic exploitation, not with anger, but with documentation. She questioned why India's democracy was constantly scrutinized while authoritarian Western allies escaped similar examination, why India's poverty was highlighted while Western wealth's origins remained unquestioned, why Indian achievements were minimized while failures were amplified. Together, one Indian diplomat and one global citizen were shaping a conversation the West wasn't prepared for, a conversation that questioned who truly holds the moral compass of our age. When India's external affairs minister speaks now, the world listens differently, not out of curiosity, but caution. In one recent address, he spoke firmly about interference, manipulation, and double standards in international relations. He didn't name nations. He didn't have to. Everyone understood. He spoke of nations that lectured others on territorial integrity while occupying lands thousands of miles from their borders, of countries that preached press freedom while surveilling journalists, of powers that championed democracy while overthrowing elected governments. The examples weren't hypothetical. Everyone in the room knew the references: the Iraq invasion, the Libya intervention, the Syrian conflict, the countless coups supported or engineered by Western intelligence agencies. Jaishankar didn't dwell on these. He simply noted them, a reminder that history has a long memory, even if some prefer to forget. He spoke of India's choice to maintain strategic autonomy, to build relationships based on mutual interest, not ideological alignment, to refuse demands that it choose sides in conflicts not of its making. This wasn't neutrality, it was multi-alignment. India would work with America on technology and security, with Russia on defense and energy, with China on trade when interests aligned, with Europe on climate and development. Each relationship on its own merits, each evaluated by what it brought to India's national interest, not by what others expected or demanded. Diplomacy, once dominated by smiles and silence, had found its mirror, and the reflection was not flattering. In 2025, when Jaishankar said that India does not need approval to define its interests, it marked more than defiance. It marked evolution. India's partnerships with the United States, once tilted by dependence, now stand as equations of mutual necessity. Defense technology sharing, space cooperation, critical mineral supply chains, clean energy development, artificial intelligence collaboration. The West realizes it cannot ignore India, not just because of India's growing economy, though that matters, not just because of its demographic weight, though that's significant, but because India offers something increasingly rare in international relations: reliability without subservience. India won't abandon partnerships over disagreements. It won't weaponize relationships. It won't demand others choose it between it and other powers. It simply asks for the same respect it offers. This approach unsettles traditional power structures. The Cold War taught nations to think in binaries: us versus them, free world versus communist bloc, democratic versus authoritarian. You're either with us or against us. India rejects this framework entirely. It insists on complexity, on nuance, on the right to disagree with partners without becoming adversaries. When American officials expressed concern about India's relationship with Russia, Jaishankar pointed out America's partnerships with nations far more problematic than Russia. When European leaders questioned India's democracy, he reminded them of Europe's colonial history and current arms sales to dictatorships. He didn't do this to deflect criticism. He did it to establish equivalence, to make clear that if standards exist, they apply to everyone, including those who proclaim them loudest. This created discomfort, because India's rise challenges not only balance, but narrative. The story the West told itself about its unique moral standing, its exceptional role in world affairs, its natural right to lead. India's success, achieved through democracy but outside Western alignment, complicates that story. The world was already shifting. Even now, the silence tells its own story. Today, the world watches as the balance of diplomacy tilts. Jaishankar's interviews trend not for rhetoric, but for restraint. He speaks without theatrics, but his calm carries weight. The United States, still powerful, senses something new. That the post-war order it built is no longer the only center of gravity. Multiple poles exist now, multiple models of development, multiple approaches to governance, multiple voices in global conversation. India's rise is not conquest, it is consequence, the product of patience, education, democracy, and the quiet endurance of 1 billion lives. 7 decades of building institutions, of maintaining democratic traditions despite poverty and diversity that would have fractured most nations, of developing indigenous capabilities in space, technology, defense, pharmaceuticals, of creating the world's largest vaccination program, digital payment system, biometric identification network. India didn't ask permission for any of this. It didn't wait for approval. It simply built, quietly and persistently. Even as Carolina Goswami reminds audiences abroad of this unseen depth, Jaishankar reminds the world's diplomats that respect cannot be outsourced. The message is simple but profound. India will cooperate, not comply. It will partner, not please, and it will define itself on its own terms. This is not rebellion, it's balance restored. The West once held unchallenged power to define international norms, shape global narratives, determine what counts as legitimate governance. That era fades, not because the West declined, though relative decline occurred, but because others rose. India's trajectory threatens no one. It invades no neighbors. It imposes no ideology. It demands no allegiance. It simply insists on being heard, respected, treated as equal. That this seems radical reveals how skewed the previous order was. What Jaishankar represents extends beyond India. He speaks for a larger shift, a rebalancing that affects all nations outside the traditional power centers. For decades, the Global South accepted a particular arrangement. Western nations set agendas. International institutions reflected Western priorities. Global media amplified Western perspectives. Development meant adopting Western models. Success meant Western approval. This arrangement persisted not through explicit coercion, though that existed, but through assumption. The assumption that Western experience was universal, that Western values were objective, that Western leadership was natural and necessary. Jaishankar challenges these assumptions not by opposing Western values, but by questioning their selective application. India is democratic, so why does it face more scrutiny than authoritarian Western allies?
India respects human rights, so why is its record examined more harshly than nations with far worse practices? The questions aren't rhetorical, they demand answers, and the absence of satisfactory answers reveals the double standards underlying much international discourse. This matters beyond India because it opens space for other nations to question, to assert, to define themselves independently. If India can maintain strategic autonomy, others can too. If India can reject false choices, others can too. If India can demand respect rather than request approval, others can too. The shift is tectonic, not sudden, but deep and irreversible. Other voices join this chorus. Indonesia speaks of Asian values. Brazil asserts Latin American perspectives. South Africa champions African priorities. These aren't challenges to universal principles, they're insistence that universal principles apply universally, not selectively. The conversation changes when previously silent voices speak, when assumptions face questions, when power must explain rather than simply assert. This is what leaves some Americans shocked, not because Jaishankar says anything untrue, but because truth, spoken clearly from the global South, disrupts comfortable narratives. Power in the 21st century no longer wears crowns or uniforms. It speaks calmly, it negotiates with dignity, and sometimes it simply refuses to be underestimated.
The West listens now, not out of courtesy, but because silence would be too revealing. To ignore India's voice would be to acknowledge its irrelevance. But the West is not irrelevant. It's simply no longer alone in defining what matters. This creates tension, but tension can be productive. It forces dialogue. It demands negotiation. It requires respect rather than assuming deference. Jaishankar doesn't seek confrontation. He seeks conversation. But conversation among equals, not between teacher and student, leader and follower, enlightened and developing. India has something to teach the world, not through lectures, but through example. That democracy works at massive scale, that diversity can be strength, that development doesn't require abandoning identity, that progress doesn't mean mimicking others. These lessons threaten no one. They simply expand possibilities. They show alternative paths to modernity, different approaches to governance, varied ways of organizing society while maintaining openness and rights. All limits may have been crossed, not in conflict, but in clarity. The clarity that India will not accept subordinate status, the clarity that respect is non-negotiable, the clarity that partnership requires equality, the clarity that past patterns need not determine future relationships. This clarity discomforts those invested in previous arrangements, but it liberates those constrained by them. The world is not turning against the West, it's turning toward balance, toward a more equitable distribution of voice and influence, toward recognition that wisdom exists beyond traditional centers, toward acknowledgement that the future will be shaped by more hands than controlled the past. Jaishankar represents this turning, not through anger or aggression, but through confident articulation of India's place in the world, a place earned through achievement, sustained through principle, expressed through clarity. His words shock not because they're harsh, but because they're true. Truth has that effect when it challenges comfortable myths. And the truth is simple. The world is changing. Power is diffusing. Voice is multiplying. And India, patient India, enduring India, rising India, will be heard. Not because it demands attention through force, but because it commands respect through substance. This is the shock. Not that India speaks, but that when it speaks, the world has no choice but to listen.